Hello everyone and welcome back to Unknown Comics. So today we're going to start getting into more character-oriented videos. So this one, it's going to be real short just to I want to keep it real simple. So we're going to get into Conan, kind of an iconic character there. We're going to talk about some little facts you might not know about him and some ways you can get some Conan content out there. But before we get into that, I want to go over our channel-wide giveaway. So when we hit 2,500 subscribers, we're going to be giving away an Amazing Spider-Man 800, the Tyler Kirkham cover, signed by Tyler Kirkham and remarked by Tyler Kirkham, and this is graded at a 9.4. So be sure you are subscribed, be sure all your friends are subscribed, and help us get to that 2,500 mark. At that point, to actually enter the contest, you're going to have to go to the original contest video and comment on that video. So only the people that comment on the giveaway, the 2,500 subscriber giveaway video, will be entered for the contest. So be sure you're doing all that stuff because we love giving away stuff here. So help us get there, and let's jump right into the meat of our video here. So we're talking about Conan. He first appeared in Weird Tales magazine in 1932. He's a creation of Robert E. Howard. It takes place in a fantasy time period on the actual Earth, so that puts it as a low fantasy, but it's a great world that's I don't think is as well talked about as like Middle Earth or Narnia. You know, some of these the Warhammer universe, some of these great fantasies out there. This one is equally as rich in lore. It's the Barbarian age. This is a fictional lost age of Earth that takes place about 10,000 BC, after the fall of Atlantis, but before any known civilizations. And there's tons of lore here, and so I want to get into kind of the what makes Conan tricky as far as making content for him, and it gets into the copyright stuff. So any of the stuff that was published in the Weird Tales magazine is considered public domain in many countries anyway. So that means pretty much anyone can go kind of rehash these stories. But also this setting, this Hyborian age, is technically public domain, and that's why we see it in other titles such as Red Sonja. I mean, they have the same gods, it's the same age. Both Red Sonja and Conan the Barbarian take place in the same setting. But then there's other stuff that Howard put out in like novels and other sorts of fiction that were not Weird Tales. That stuff is technically owned by Conan Properties International. And so there's a lot of weird stuff, and that's probably why we haven't seen any good movies in several years, stuff like that, TV shows, because it's kind of legally messy. But that is why we see the actual setting used in several different places, and this is also why we see Conan being published by two different publishers, which I think is super interesting for a character. Like I said, he's super iconic. I think when you think of Barbarian, as far as like, you know, D&D and all this stuff, that Conan look is what comes to mind, and I would say inspires stuff like He-Man and stuff like that. So he's a super iconic character. Really, what I want to get into for this video is I kind of want to compare and contrast his Marvel book versus his Ablaze book, because like I said, with the copyright stuff, it makes it to where both companies can publish Conan titles. So the Marvel book, actually called Conan the Barbarian, it's an ongoing series, and one thing that I think they capture what Conan is meant to be better in the Marvel book, because he's not supposed to be just this, you know, Neanderthal, super strong, what you think of as a barbarian, like not very smart but can fight and is super strong. You know, Conan in the Marvel book is actually very cunning, and you know, he's figuring out all these plots of assassinations and stuff like that, and he's figured out who's behind it in time to actually do something about it. I think that's very important to see, that he's also almost like a tactician, as far as like these super ancient times would consider, I would think. So it's good to see that intellectual aspect. The tone of the Marvel book, I would say, is overall lighter. And like I said, it's an ongoing series, so that would be one thing that would sway me more towards the Ablaze, because, you know, I've said it other times on the channel, I prefer miniseries just because I want to read the story and then be done with it and move on to something else. But also, I believe that Marvel is actually licensed by the Conan Properties International. That's why they get to use Conan the Barbarian in the actual title. So this means those stories we're getting more new stories from that. So now I'm going to jump over to the Ablaze, and the Ablaze book is actually called the Cimmerian. And so for those of you who don't know, the Cimmeria is the kingdom that Conan is from. So that's kind of how they avoid any issues there, is by calling it that. And then there's usually some sort of subtitle, because in the Ablaze side, they're more mini-series. So the one that just finished up was a 3-part called Iron Shadows and the Moon, and I really enjoyed it. One thing with the Ablaze, I would say both series are more for older readers. Marvel more because of it's kind of gory, but the Ablaze is definitely for mature readers because not only is it gory, there is some nudity in it. The tone is much darker. In the Cimmerian, they really portray Conan as all brawn and no brains. But at least that's how it seems, because he doesn't talk much, and you don't get that inner dialogue. So it's really hard to tell what's going on in his mind, other than that he can fight really good. Another thing that I think is cool, so these are more retellings of the Weird Tales stories, so that's not really new content, but I really think it's cool because in the back of the book you get the actual original text from the magazine, and so you can read how the story originally went by Robert E. Howard, which I think that's super cool. To me, comics and novels, it's two different styles and two different fields. You might get the story out of the comic and it's going to be entertaining and the artwork's pretty, but then you go read the novel portion of it and you're going to, maybe he is deeper of a Conan in this than we really get, but you would have to read the novel to really get all those thoughts and emotions that aren't really portrayed in comics as well. So there's my kind of compare and contrast of the two books. They're both really good. I would recommend both. Just if you're gonna have the Cimmerian, be sure that the reader for it is of the appropriate age. But like I said, both are fantastic. I love fantasy anyway, and they're good reads. Like I said, the Hyborian Age is really interesting. I don't think it gets enough credit as a fantasy setting. So be sure to check both out. Like I said, be sure to go check out that 2,500 subscriber giveaway video. Make sure you're entered in that contest. Give this video a thumbs up, comments, all that stuff. Subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified every time we post new content. All this stuff helps the channel out a ton, so that way we can keep bringing you guys more content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.